Hi, welcome back to Tao of Twang. I'm Dave. So today's lesson is about melody, and specifically, where do we get our melodic ideas from, right? Our phrasings and things. And, you know, I get a lot of comments and questions on the channel. They're like, man, I love this lesson. This is fun. It works. Using that scale with that progression, this is great. And then, you know, along with that, I get a lot of, yeah, you know, it's working. I think the thing that's missing for me is just like, my phrasing or like the timing of, how I'm making different statements and so forth. And if you're doing this purely instrumentally, right, like not covering songs or in a band where you've got a vocal part and then you do a guitar solo or something, in those situations, it kind of naturally carries over the vocal line more. But when you just kind of, like on this channel, we just throw down a chord progression, and then we start talking about the theory of what scales will work and stuff. We kind of skip over this kind of more just basic language aspect, right, of what we're doing. And I say language as an analogy, as well as as a definition for how we express ourselves musically. But it does relate and is comparable to our way we vocalize and verbalize in our speaking, right? Um, we use punctuation, we use timing, we use inflection that gives things meaning, right? We don't just go right along everything to say, right? Words themselves wouldn't mean that much without those other elements, right? So if you think about that in terms of relating that to scales and so forth in music, perhaps the same thing applies. Those things alone are, cool. They sound good. They're fascinating how it all fits together and everything mathematically, but it doesn't really speak to your soul until you add those other human elements, right? So, to our benefit, a lot of people have made some beautiful expressions in rock music, way before we got into this, and perhaps are still doing that. But something that's real familiar to you is something that's in your body and in your mind already. And if you go back and look at this intro now, or the practice loop, and you probably caught it, many of you. Little after midnight action there, right? Okay, so now I've heard this method used my whole life. Everything from row, row, row your boat to you are my sunshine to, familiar things, okay? Nursery rhymes, right? I've heard that mentioned many times over the years. And I guess it would be cool, like if your parents were so cool that your nursery rhymes were like, Joe Cocker and Steve Winwood and J.J. Cale or something. That would be cool, right? Yeah. But, so I just draw from those things because they're things that made impressions on me early on, and I've heard them many times, and I suspect that many of you have as well. So that stuff's already inside us, so let's use it. Put this track on, and what I like to do at first is really just seek out the notes of the vocal line, okay? Without a lot of embellishment or hammers and bends and things. Sometimes you have to bend it a little bit or it doesn't make sense, right? Yeah. Then you can start to embellish it a little bit more, right? There, I did a little pickup to it that's not even part of the vocal line in the song, right? But it comes before that Kind of missed it, didn't I? Leave that space in between, just like you're singing a song. Then start to add more of your scale and bends and your kind of blues playing. I'm going to give you some space here and kind of jump in on that track wherever it makes sense for you. So start on the A note for this key. Just work that out for a minute or so. All right. Hopefully that's working out for you. Right? Okay. I'm going to leave it on. And then when we start to branch out, we're going to take that core feeling with us. Leave some space. Come back to the simplified version of the line every once in a while. Then you can start kind of using an answering phrase in between what are the vocal lines, if that makes sense, like this. I'll do it more simply. See what I did there? I filled in the whole space a couple of those times around, but it still came back to where I could feel where that vocal line would be, right? So it's kind of taking those simple melodic phrases, those statements, and expanding it into, you know, more of a embellished and expansive guitar solo, right? So now I used 3 or 4 tunes when I was doing this. I just picked the After Midnight one to do for the video, but I was doing this process with like 3 other songs as well, and it was working out great. And I'm not going to tell you what those were, but why don't you see if you can come up with a couple of other melodies that you're very familiar with and vocal lines, and try this over this backing track and put that in the comments. I'd be curious to see what other ones we can come up with that will kind of fit into that feeling, right? Now, we're not even changing the chords in this progression like you would in After Midnight, right? Right? But you can still feel it. You can still adhere to it. Because our minds are able to process this stuff that's so complex, right? And sometimes when we kind of get into, we get the kind of the tunnel vision going, right? We're just thinking about the scales, and this is something that really kind of accesses more of a mind-body connection part of our musical selves, I think. But I'd be curious to know how this works out for you. And even if a tune's in a different key or whatever, the original song, just kind of move it to whatever, key you need to fit, the progression that you're improvising over. So hopefully this is a good step. If you haven't been doing this already, I think this will really pay off for you. And like I said, see if you can come up with some other tunes and let us all know what those are. That'd be fun. All right. Great to be with you as always. Let me know how this one goes. I'll talk to you soon. Take it easy.